Good evening, everyone, and welcome to From Sickness to Health. I'm Rico Hill, the host of this show that continues beyond the boundaries of the 3ABN broadcast network. And again, we are joined with a fabulous guest. Our guest tonight is none other than the guy who was my guest the last time. It's the guy who I like to say is on a crusade for health, a crusade for better living, a crusade to break up every nay relationship that exists. We'll explain that further in just a few moments. But I'm with Dr. Milton Mills. He's a good friend of mine. And I'll tell you, he and I just enjoy talking about health. And tonight, again, we're talking about men's health. We're talking about the health of men, men who tend to not be as inclined to get screenings and get checkups and go to the doctor. It's uncomfortable, sometimes absolutely literally. But it doesn't matter. We need better health. And people like Dr. Milton Mills, he's not just going to uh, tell you to do this or that. He's very good at it. But he also is someone who just speaks the truth with power. He speaks truth to power, and the things that he shares are very powerful. And without further ado, I would like to welcome my guest, my friend, Dr. Milton Mills. Welcome, my friend, to the program.
Thank you, Rico. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be back with you this week. And I just want to be clear for people who want to find the podcast on YouTube. It's at From Sickness to Health on
From
YouTube
sickness to
Live.
health. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Because I just had a friend ask me, is there a link? She said, is there a link to YouTube? But
Hey,
it's on
watch.
Facebook.
Yeah, it's on Facebook. So
Okay.
here's a real simple thing with technology. I'm going to ask our producer to put that on the scroll right across the bottom of the screen for anyone who is tuning in or wants to have someone else tune in. They can just go to at from sickness to health.com. If that's not correct, I'm sure she'll correct me with that scroll. So Milton, my friend, please tell this vast audience of some 700,000 people who have joined us tonight.
Wow.
That was a slight exaggeration. It's only 600,000. Look, tell this audience tonight um, who you are and what type of medicine do you practice?
Sure. I am internal medicine and critical care physician.
Mhm.
I graduated from Stanford University School of Medicine, and I practice in the Washington D.C. metro area. And I have been interested in doing work with diet and nutrition throughout my career, helping people to understand that we don't have to live in fear that our
Mm.
bodies are going to fall apart and rise up and attack us as we age, if we eat the right foods and if we adhere to the diet God designed us to eat. And science has shown us over and over and conclusively that not only are our bodies designed to ingest, but that will keep us healthy, reduce disease risk, and keep our minds functioning healthfully and reduce the risk for dementia.
You
So,
know that there's something that I've read from Hippocrates, father of medicine, and whenever I give this quotation at a health talk, people already know it, and that is, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." Most people probably already knew where I was going with that, but then here's the thing that most people don't know is that he also said natural forces within us are the true healers of disease. Now, what made me just think about that statement from here, Hippocrates, was you just said, you talked about how people don't have to live in fear and that the body, when you do right, the body will do what it's supposed to do. And I like this idea, that concept that the body will heal itself when given the right conditions. Is that a true statement?
Oh, well, it's absolutely a true statement. And, you know, everybody out, I would say probably 99% of the people who are listening to this podcast
Hmm.
own an automobile and likely have purchased an automobile.
Hmm.
And the first thing you receive when you go to a dealership and you purchase a car is you get an owner's manual. And that owner's manual tells you what gas to put in the car, how often to change the oil and rotate the tires. And if you purchase a car and it tells you not only what fuel to put in, but what type of fuel to put in it, if you purchase a car that tells you to put gas in your automobile, nobody is going to drive that car off the lot. Well, nobody with good sense, and take it to the fuel station and fill it up with diesel, because you know that that will destroy your engine.
Hmm.
Okay. And you know that pretty soon that car is going to break down and it's not going to run properly. But
Right,
even
right.
further, when it comes to the type of gas you put in your car, you have to put the right type of gas in it. And I can explain.
87 octane, 88,
Thank you.
89, 91 octane.
And
Yeah.
let me explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
My very first car was a BMW. Okay. I
Okay.
saved up my money and I bought this BMW. And when I got my instructions from the guy that sold me the car, he told me, he said, this is a high performance engine. You have to put high octane, the highest octane gas that they sell in this car.
Hmm.
Now, I was in college at the time, and I was, working full time, but going to school, college full time at night. And I'm thinking to myself, well, look, the highest octane gas is the most expensive. And
Too expensive. Yeah.
yeah, I can probably get away with putting regular gas in this car, save myself a little money. And I did that. When I filled up the car, I put regular gas in that car. And that gas started to knock like a Jehovah's Witness on Saturday morning. And I, I learned my lesson real quick.
You learned that
And
lesson real fast, didn't you?
I'm telling you. And from
Mm.
then on, I put nothing but Supreme gas in that car, and it ran like it was supposed to.
There you
And so
go.
I learned that you have to adhere to the manufacturer's recommendations.
So
Likewise,
so all the points you've just made is really kind of we're talking this tonight we're talking tonight about men's health, and oftentimes not only are we not getting the necessary care that we need, the screenings that we need, and the going to the doctor with regularity, but we're also putting the wrong things into our bodies, causing us to break down prematurely and have all sorts of issues. And then you get on that pharmaceutical treadmill that kind of goes nowhere except down. So here's what and
well,
by the way,
well,
last week we talked
finish
about.
making a quick point that I
Oh, I'm
want to
sorry.
make.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, because this is critically important to me.
Okay.
When you read the very first chapter of Genesis, God creates Adam and Eve, and his first recorded conversation with them, he tells them what to eat. And he tells them to eat an entirely plant-based diet. And that's important because he designs us and then he tells us what to put in these bodies that he designed.
Okay, you're making a great point, but I got to jump in. I got to jump in because
Sure.
here's the thing that I noticed, Milton, is that before God made a man, he made a menu.
You got that
Before
right.
Before man was designed, well, he was designed in the mind of God, but created where God formed and shaped him and breathed into his lungs the breath of life. He had already laid out the menu in Genesis 1:29, and then he makes the man. So, how important is this diet when God, because God had a menu,
Right.
and there were things that he could have put on the menu. There were cattle, on the dry land and eating grass. There were fowls of the air. There were, four rivers that went around Eden, and there were lots of fish in the water. But he put none of those things on the menu, and
Absolutely.
then he makes man, and then tells him, "This is what has been made for you.
Right.
Shall be your food." Continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it actually gets even more sophisticated because, of course, we know Adam and Eve kind of messed things up. Okay, they disobeyed, sin enters the world, and God says, "Okay, now disease, decay, death has come into the world. I've got to curse my creation, change it. Now, some of the animals have to become carnivores to weed out the death and the disease, and I've got to change things. I've even got to change humanity's diet because you guys can no longer eat from the tree of life, which perpetuates life forever. So now you shall eat the plants of the field." So the point is, even before and after sin entered the world, God decreed that we were to be strictly plant based. We were not to eat dead flesh. We were
Hey,
to
Milton, you said something just now that I never really considered. You said that God had to turn those animals because they weren't
No, they
carnivores.
weren't.
They weren't carnivores before, and
No,
they become carnivores
correct.
to weed out the sick and diseased animals. I
Exactly.
never considered that's a new one. Now, before we go further down this path, it's a good path, but want to make sure that we sort of continue on this idea of prostate, because as you
Right.
pointed out last week, prostate health, as you pointed out last week, that this is something that is the leading cause of cancer for men, breast
For
cancer
me.
being for women, but it's the leading cause of cancer for men. But can I
After
can I,
lung
can
cancer,
after
and
lunch?
lung cancer is related to smoking. So
Okay.
we're just gonna push that aside because nobody should be smoking.
Nobody,
So
yeah, that's it. Yeah,
lung
that's
cancer,
just
it's
yeah.
prostate cancer. Yes.
Okay, so I got to tell you a story as we launch in. We may talk a little bit about prostate health, but we certainly want to give men some very practical information about screenings, and
Right.
how we all can be much more vigilant about our health. But I got to tell you a story, man. I was in Arizona, and on this popular radio station, every morning when I would take my son to school, the guy was come on and he was talking about prostate screenings, right?
Right.
And he would promote this thing every top of the hour, at the half hour, and I would hear several times, just taking my son to school, and then maybe run a few errands, and he would come on and say, "All right, man, let's go. We got to go get our prostate screen. We got need that examination." And I tell you what, I got mine screened, and my wife did too. Milton, Milton, he said that for a week, every single day and every opportunity. He said, and he would say it just like that. I got mine screened, and my wife did too. And I said, I'm going to call the station and inform this brother
That
that
I hope she didn't
he's either ignorant or he's just lying, because women don't have
do not have
prostates.
prostate.
So
Exactly.
I share this story to illustrate the point that a lot of times we don't even know what the prostate is,
Yes.
that it
Yeah.
needs to be examined. So let's go to basics before we get into a lot of the nutritional stuff and different things that people can do. What is the prostate?
Okay. That's a very good and important question. Prostate gland is a small walnut-sized gland that actually sits below the bladder in men,
Hmm.
that actually creates most of the fluid that comes out when a man ejaculates. And there are two glands, sperm glands, that actually sit above the prostate gland, and that send sperm down into the prostate gland to mix with prostate fluid. And that then, when a man is having sexual relations, mixes with the prostate fluid and then comes out in the ejaculate and is then ejaculated into the vagina. And that carries the sperm into the vaginal canal and allows the sperm to swim up into the fallopian tubes. And if there's an egg present, bond with the egg and form a human, new human being, in essence.
And that, boys and girls, is how babies are made.
And babies are made, exactly. But the key is that as men age, depending on as men age, the prostate tends to enlarge, especially if men are eating a diet that is very high in animal foods, particularly dairy foods, because they tend to be high in hormones.
And what they call inflammation, is that what's going on?
Well, the inflammation accelerates the growth of the prostate, but dairy.
But why is that? I want to understand that for myself. Now, why would inflammation, an inflammatory condition, cause the acceleration of the prostate to enlarge? Is it because swelling, or?
Yes, I mean, exactly. Inflammation causes swelling. And if you get chronic inflammation, you get chronic swelling and it becomes more permanent over time. And so you can imagine, if you have a chronic injury, an ankle injury that doesn't go away, or you keep injuring that ankle and it gets swollen and it stays swollen over time, it becomes more permanent. Or you injure your knee and it remains chronically inflamed. Eventually that knee starts, the swelling starts to harden and the tissues become harder and inflamed, and they don't return to their normal size. And the same thing can happen with the prostate. And that's and the issue with animal tissues is that dairy products contain estrogens. Estrogens, and I encourage everyone listening to this podcast to look up the chemical structure of estrogen and testosterone. And what you'll notice is that the difference between the chemical structure of estrogen and testosterone are just a couple of attachments of different chemical groups on the estrogen and testosterone molecule, that when men ingest estrogen, those molecules can be turned by our fatty tissue into testosterone, which will then act on the prostate to cause it to enlarge, to make those prostate tissues to grow. And then if there are inflammatory compounds around chronic inflammation, that accelerates the growth of the prostate tissues, that make it grow even further. And part of the problem is the urethra, because, like I said, remember, the bladder sits on top of the prostate. It has to pass through the prostate to come out through the penis in order for us to urinate. Well, as the prostate enlarges, it tends to constrict the urethra, and that can cause men to have difficulty urinating and emptying the bladder as we age. And what will begin to happen is that men will have to start to get up multiple times during the night to empty their bladder.
Because they don't get a full emptying of the bladder each time.
Exactly. And they will notice that their urine stream starts to get weaker, or they'll have trouble starting when they go to urinate. It takes them time to kind of get that stream going, and then difficulty stopping. There'll be some dribbling going on, and sometimes if that becomes a real problem, men will have to get a procedure called a TURP, which stands for transurethral TUR resection of the prostate. And what it literally is a roto-rooter procedure.
Yeah. All right, let's move on from that one, brother.
where they send in a little catheter with a thread on it to just remove some of that tissue to open it up.
That doesn't sound fun.
No, it's well, they do it under anesthesia, so it shouldn't hurt. But you don't want to have that done. But
I don't even want to think about it being done. Yeah, anyway. So let me ask you this: How often should men have their prostate checked?
Sure.
And what I mean, there are different types of examinations, aren't there?
Absolutely. So
how often and what type should it be? Just a PSA tape test, which is just with the blood, or should it be physical exam? Should it be some kind of imaging? What is best?
Sure.
And how often?
Yes. So there has been some controversy about this. Okay. But in my opinion, there really is no controversy. We talked last week about the fact that prostate cancer is 70% more prevalent in Black men than it is Caucasian men. And I want to be clear. A big part of the problem is that the vast majority of Black men in Western countries were drawn from Western African countries and populations. Dairy products were never part of Western African cuisine. Let's be crystal clear about it.
Hold on. Not goat milk, not cow's milk. Why not?
The cow's milk was never part of Western African cuisine. The consumption of dairy products is a post-colonization phenomenon. Okay? And as a result, there has been absolutely no genetic adaptation to the consumption of dairy products whatsoever, which is why the lactose intolerance is so prevalent amongst African Americans. It runs around 75 to 78%. And let me be clear, the only reason it's around 75 to 78% amongst African Americans is the same reason that you're light skinned. It's the rate of African women during slavery and the penetrance of European genes amongst African Americans, because lactose intolerance amongst West Africans is 95 to 99%. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So let me make sure I understand, so that everyone who's listening to this understands as well. So what you're saying is that it was not a part of the diet in Western Africa, right?
No,
it wasn't a part of it. We then come here, Atlantic slave trade. We are, now the African diaspora is, from South America through the Caribbean through the Americas, right?
Right.
So through America. So because of the what took place during slavery with
the mixing of
the mixing. Well, I don't. That's a light way of saying it. It was a raping of the enslaved women,
right?
And because of that, we got a little more tolerance toward it. But if you go and test only slightly, but if you go back to Western Africa and test them, they would be somewhere around 95%.
95 to 99%
of lactose intolerance.
Yeah, but even amongst African Americans, it's still 75 to 78% lactose intolerant. But there's still, the bottom line is that there is essentially no real genetic adaptation to consuming dairy, and it is the leading cause of a risk factor for developing prostate cancer. It is very toxic to our genetic makeup. Um,
So does this include cheese as well?
Cheese is even worse because cheese is concentrated milk.
Right,
It takes
right,
about a
right.
gallon of milk to
So
make
milk,
a pound of
cheese, milk, cheese.
milk, cheese, yogurt, sour cream, uh, cottage cheese, which is curdled milk. I mean, all of it. Anything from cow's milk, sheep's milk, none of it is healthy.
Mm.
We, I tell people, you should not be eating dairy products any more than I would be. I should be transfusing cow's blood to you if you needed a blood transfusion. It is not meant for you. It is not healthy for you. It is, I mean, first of all, it is crazy that human beings are consuming the mammary secretions of another mammal at all. I mean, we don't drink rat milk. We don't drink
I
cat
hear, I
milk.
hear, I hear the rat milk is pretty high in protein, though. It's probably one of the highest.
Well, yes, it is. But
It's
it's, I mean,
you
most
can't get a
people
lot
say
of it, so.
that is nasty, and yes, it would be.
Hold up,
I
hold
mean,
up, hold up, Milton. I got to ask you this because I saw one of your presentations. I've seen a lot of your presentations, and by the time we get to the end of this particular broadcast, I would love it if you would share some of the places, because not only is he a wonderful physician and knows his stuff, but he's an incredible lecturer, and he's got a few lectures coming up that are pretty close by if you're on the East Coast and around DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Anyway, we'll talk about that towards the end. So please don't let me forget, Milton, to talk about where you're going to be speaking. Now, I got to ask you this. We've talked about prostate health, and you can circle back whenever you want and talk about
sure.
the type of examinations. But before we run out of time, I want to also include some of the other things that we as men suffer from, including heart disease, atherosclerosis, and stroke. And all these things, they're related in terms of, what's going into the body. That is the same thing that can clog up the blood vessels. You talked about that last week, that before you start to see heart disease, the canary in the coal mine is in the penis with
Erectile
the
dysfunction. Yes.
ED. So, but I heard one Dr. Michael Greger, whom I'm sure you know. I heard him say something that really got my attention, and I have looked at it, and they seem to try to back away from it, but I'm wondering if it's true. I think it makes physiological sense. So I'm going to ask you, and that is, meat and cheese are by and large on a pH scale pretty acidic. Yes or
Yes.
no? Okay.
Oh,
So in
that is
okay,
absolutely true.
okay. So if that's true, and the body prefers to be, in terms of
Alkaline.
homeostasis, alkaline. Okay. Much of your plant-based foods are
Alkaline.
alkaline. Okay. So if the body takes in, say, beef and chicken and things that are more acidic, cheese, it takes those things in. Uh, he shared, and he showed some data on it as well, that the body has to pull to buffer the acidity some calcium, to actually help the body to become more alkaline. Because, as I understand it, disease thrives in a acidic environment, right?
Yes.
And health thrives in an alkaline environment. Okay. That said, um, we find that the largest calcium stores in the bones, correct?
There's no question. Yeah. So actually,
So,
what it is the buffer that is used to neutralize that acid is the phosphate that is in your bones. And in order to
ah,
get that phosphate, you've got to dissolve the bone and release the calcium, and then the calcium comes out in your urine. And so you end up losing the calcium so you can release that phosphate to buffer all that acid. And that's why
Ah,
high animal protein diets cause increase your risk for kidney stones, among other
kidney
problems.
stones. Now,
Yes,
now they also, when getting to heart disease, when there's clogging of the arteries,
yes,
the fatty streaks, but they
right.
also find they have a calcium score. So does some of that calcium lodge itself also in the arteries to the heart?
Yes. Yeah, I want to make a blanket statement so
Here
that
it comes. Here it comes.
people will understand
Go
this,
ahead.
that the diseases that we see are the result of essentially the same process manifesting itself in different tissues. And it is the eating of animal foods will cause different diseases in different tissues, but it is the same pathological process. So, eating meat and dairy causes heart disease in the vascular system, causes cancer, depending on which tissues you're looking at, causes autoimmune diseases when looking at the immune system, causes diabetes when looking at the endocrine system, and causes osteoporosis when we're looking at the skeletal system. So it is the same pathological process, that is eating this acidic animal protein based diet, but it manifests itself differently depending on which tissues and which organ systems you're looking at. But it is the same pathological process caused by eating animal foods that we are not designed to handle.
Now I'm going to ask you a question, and I kind of know what your answer is, but I think people may have seen this article. This was an AP story a few years ago, and it talked about, when it talked about heart disease and atherosclerosis, it says that heart disease. This was in the article, and it was done by a major researcher at one of these, these universities, and it said that heart disease, and I'm quoting, has been stalking human beings ever since the time of the Aleutians, going back to hunters and gatherers. So and then I saw something, and I wonder if you see and hear the same thing, but it says that it's been stalking, like this disease process is like behind bushes, waiting for you to come by, and it pounces on you and causes you to have heart disease. But I thought it was interesting that these 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 hunter gatherer nomads uh, were go back thousands of years, 4,000 years, in fact. In fact, you know, they even point to the fact that when they have gone and exhumed these bodies from the Egyptians, they found, through the technology that we have today, and plus the fact that Egyptians preserved the bodies, they mummified the bodies so well that you could see, that there was atherosclerosis, there was hardening of the arteries, there were all types of tissue issues that came as a result of high sugar and diabetes. In fact, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that that's the first place that we see this idea of diabetes. Talk to me about this idea of heart disease is just what's going to happen when you get older. You can't get
Okay,
around
the reason I'm smiling is because it was only the rich people that got preserved. Okay,
it.
so this is a disease of affluence, and because it was the rich people who were the ones sitting around eating these high fat, high meat diets, they were the ones that were showing up with the
Mm.
diabetes and the fatty streaks and the gout. It's just like during the Middle Ages, gout was a rich man's disease. Nobody else could afford to eat all that meat and fat and high sugar diets. The peasants were eating a plant-based diet, and
Whether
like
they liked it or not, huh?
whether they, because that's all they could afford. In
Mm.
fact, in Middle Age England, it you would be killed and executed for quote killing the king's deer. The deer were felt to belong to the nobility. the peasants had to eat what they could grow on the land, and the meat was reserved for the nobility, and the peasants were only allowed to eat flesh on special holiday occasions. So for the majority of recorded history, the lower classes ate plant foods, and even this idea that paleo people ate or hunter gatherers ate all this meat is a myth. When they go back and look at fossilized coprolites, what they find is these giant fossilized feces that show that these people were eating 100 to 120 grams of plant fiber every day, because
Mm.
that's what they could get. They were not eating meat. They were eating primarily plants because their technology would not allow them to efficiently hunt and kill enough animals to eat a meat-based diet. This nonsense that human beings survived on large amounts of animal foods is just that. It's nonsense. For most of human history, human beings ate a primarily plant-based diet, which is why we have a physiology that is built around plant foods.
Oh, wait a second. Wait a second. Let me understand this. Physiology. Talk to us about that. What are you talking about? Are you talking about? I mean, people would say, "Hey, we got canine teeth. We got. We eat meat and we do it just fine. It goes in, it comes out. Is that true?"
No, actually, it does not go and it comes out. It stays in much too long for an animal of our size, and that's why it creates all of these toxic compounds that lead to colon cancer.
Well,
When
start
you
with the teeth. Start with the teeth, though.
Okay, well, let's start with the teeth.
Start with the teeth.
When you compare the canines in humans to the
Hmm.
canines of other primates, human canines are feminized. And what does that mean? That means
Fem-
that human,
Feminized.
yes, anthropologists say that human males have feminized canines, meaning that we have small little canines. The canines in other primate males are huge because they are used for weapons and as threat displays. Look at the canines in any other ape or monkey, they're giant. And they use them for fighting, they use them as threats. But in human males, they're tiny and they are great for tearing open an envelope, but not much else. They they can't be used for eating meat or anything else. And what you're doing right now, smiling,
Yeah.
in every animal, showing your teeth is a threat display, except in humans. Smiling is a way of disarming an opponent and showing that you're friendly. The
Hmm.
smile in humans is a biological handshake. What is a handshake? It's a way of showing I don't have a weapon. And that's what a smile is. It's a
Hmm.
way of showing people, hey, I'm a good guy. I don't have those big, dangerous canines. I don't have a weapon. I'm nice. See, I'm friendly.
I love it. I love it.
Yes.
That's
So
good.
we don't
That's good.
have those monstrous, dangerous canines because we're good guys. We're friendly.
Put
Um,
that up. Put that up.
yes,
A smile is a biological handshake.
handshake. There you
That's a new
go.
one.
It's all
Print
mine.
it. Print
Yeah.
it.
And that's what it's there for. It's to show that we're different. We're a different species. We are cooperative. We're friendly. We work together.
Hmm.
And our jaw structure, our digestive tract is designed to handle plant foods. It's long, it's elaborate, and we have the colon that is designed to handle roughage, plant food. And we're now learning that our microbiome needs a lot of plant fiber to break that plant fiber down into neurotransmitters, into bioactive compounds that improve our mental functioning, the functioning of our immune system, our cardiovascular system, makes
Hmm.
us more resistant to disease. And when we don't have that plant fiber, that's what makes us sick, more prone to infections, and actually causes us not to live as long, makes us more prone to obesity and all kinds of other illnesses. It is the lack of plant fiber in our diet that has caused us to become sickly and prone to disease and less able to ward off all of the infections and illnesses that we see coming our way in modern society.
Wow. That's a lot, but you said something in there that my mind, speaking of your mental, just latched on to, and that is the effect of diet and the mind. In the book
Yes.
by Dr. Casey Means, who also went to Stanford, to your school, Dr. Casey Means, who's being, I think, considered right now to be the Surgeon General. But I read her book before that, before this potential appointment. And in her book, Good Energy, Dr. Casey Means says some she says some amazing things. And one of the things that she says that we are we are built by food. She says that food is the blueprint for human life. That what the mother eats while the child is in the womb actually forms that child. She says, in addition to that, and this is the one that blew me away. She said that thoughts and feelings are produced by food.
Well,
Thoughts and
yes,
feelings, in other words, the serotonin,
right.
which I believe is a neurotransmitter,
Yes.
is actually the chemical makeup of that is produced by the food we eat. So how we feel, and this made me think of a quotation that I read in a wonderful book. It says that thoughts and feelings combined make up the moral character. That's the thing that made it right away made me think about is that somehow that food is affecting how you think and feel. Talk about that.
Well, actually, I'm so glad you brought that up because some of the latest studies have shown that the amount of fiber a mother eats when she's carrying her fetus affects how well that fetus's brain will develop. It affects the mental functioning of the fetus, the motor development of the fetus, and how well that child will be able to function once it's born. And if she doesn't eat enough
Hmm.
fiber, that child will not have as fine motor coordination or be as functional in terms of its ability to multitask and do other things. So the fact is that fiber will help that child literally be
Mm.
more human. Furthermore, we know that people that eat more fiber as adults are less prone to depression, anxiety, and other mental disorders. So, again, plant fiber is critical to our health. And part of the reason is many of the antioxidants and phytochemicals and compounds that are crucial to plant to the powerful components and that make plants healthy are bound to the fiber, and you can't get them if you just juice plants. You only can get them when you actually eat the whole plant and allow the bacteria in your colon to break down that fiber and release those phytonutrients and antioxidants and compounds so that your body can absorb them and receive the full advantage of them. So we literally need that plant fiber to be acted on by our microbiome in order to receive the full effects of them and to get their anti-cancer and anti-disease properties. And that's one of the
Oh.
reasons that we are so prone to developing cancer and other diseases because we're not getting the effects of this plant fiber. So it's like we are literally killing ourselves by the things that we're eating and the things that we are not eating.
Wow, wow. So, okay, you said a lot there, and I know people are like, Whoa. I mean, there were a few things in there that made me say, this is you, and you said it's data, it's research.
Oh,
These
this
are
is
based on
documented
studies.
research.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I know you don't say anything that's just out of the blue. You said because it's what, and I know you are an avid reader and researcher. So I know. In fact, you these are your words. You said you're kind of a chemistry nerd. All right.
Absolutely.
So, but let me ask you this, because people are listening to this, and men especially, and we want to make sure that we get practical because I'm plant based and you've scared me. So,
I
right?
want people to start getting their PSA checked when they're 40 years old and they
Yeah.
get it checked every
Oh,
year.
hold on a second. Hold on a second. Before I'm going to come to that. I know that we're running out of time, but I want to just say I was in last week. I was in Detroit. I was in Detroit, and I spoke at a church there in Detroit. And we did an afternoon meeting where we do Q&A, and I just kind of answer questions, and I always point to the data, and I often quote you. I got so much more to quote now, but somebody said something to me as a question. They said, well, how do people do this gradually? How do people
Do
do
it.
this gradually? And I just learned that Martin Luther King actually said gradualism leads to do nothingism, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So she says, well, how do you do this gradually? Because some people just get overwhelmed. And it was interesting. I said, um, you know, she was a doctor. I said, doctor, you know, it's interesting because when I first became plant based, and I remember, and maybe you remember this too, Milton, that back in the late 80s, early 90s, that plant based milk, they only had soy milk, and it was absolutely wretched. It was terrible. I mean, you had to hold your nose to drink this stuff. It,
I
wa-
just didn't drink it. Yeah.
it was that bad. It was so bad that even if you put it on cereal, it still didn't taste good. Water was better. But
Right.
but I
Orange
said now, or orange juice, and now you've got oat milk, you've got cashew milk, you've
almond,
got coconut
rice.
milk, rice, hemp. I mean, you've
Yeah.
got a variety of milks, and everywhere you go, there's a plant-based restaurant. So it's almost like it was a 20-25 year ago question for a situation now where we don't have to. It's not difficult, right? I mean,
No.
and by the way, what we do is when we make a meal, somehow we've gotten socialized to think that the plate needs to be something brown and fried, or brown and barbecued, and then other little small things are less important. But really the most important things are the smaller side, like the side dishes, right? But really, and people will ask you, well, what do you eat? I'm like, I eat those things that you just consider sides.
Right.
Talk a little bit about this world that we live in now,
Sure.
and that people don't have to feel like this is overwhelming, because right now the data is on our side, and the availability and accessibility is also on our side. Is that right?
Yes. So I tell people all the time, meatless Mondays are like crackless Tuesdays. Nice idea that does not go nearly far enough. Okay. I don't believe in
Hold up.
incrementalism.
Hold up, man. Meatless Mondays is
Are
like
like crackless Tuesdays. It's a nice idea that does not go nearly far enough. Okay.
crack. Please put that up. Crackless Tuesdays.
Yes.
Crack.
It's-
For those
I
who don't
mean,
know, crack, what crack is.
right.
If somehow you've forgotten what crack is.
I mean, no, nobody would accept that. Okay, I'm gonna smoke crack. I'm just not gonna smoke it on Tuesday. No, that's not good enough. You got to stop. Okay, and if you know something is toxic, you got to stop. Nobody gets up at church and says, "Pastor, I've seen the light. I'm gonna stop horning around one day a week." No, if you
Stop,
don't,
stop, 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 stop. You're killing me, man.
if
You are killing me.
if you're going to turn your life around, turn it around. And if you know something is toxic, stop. So you got to lay on the floor, kick, scream, holler, throw things at the wall until you get over it. and let your body heal. Okay.
Mm.
Call on the name of the Lord and ask Him to give you the power to get past this so that your body can truly heal and you can get the benefits of
Yeah.
being fully plant based. And
Now,
the goal is not to make your plant food look like an iteration of your animal food. No, we don't want a huge plate of fake meat and a garnish of vegetables. We want whole plant food. Yeah, you can use a little bit of, some plant sausage or something like that, but the majority of what you eat should look like something that came out of the ground, off a tree, or with a whole plant, because that's where the power is, that's where the health is, that's where the beauty is, and that's what's going to remake your body and your life and restore your health. So
and you've
go
made it
ahead.
clear, and we're talking about your physical health, your mental health,
Yes.
and boy, if you've got your mental and you've got your physical, your social health is better. Yeah, I mean, I've sat down with someone just yesterday who has so many issues, uh, aches and pains and inflammation in the back
Right.
and hips. Older gentleman, but as I was just kind of walking through sort of a consultation, and he said, "Yeah, I love ice cream and I love to have some pizza, with cheese and so forth." And then they just kind of let it slip out. Yeah, and I eat chicken and fish. I mean, chicken and beef. And I said, "What? Now you're having inflammation?"
Okay.
And you didn't. I'm telling you, Milton. I thought he was plant based. I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, you're literally, these are self inflicted wounds,
Right. You're
right?
poisoning yourself.
You
Right.
poison yourself. Now, you said something, and I don't want it to get away. You mentioned the microbiome. Somebody probably said, "What did he say?" Microbiome, and I want you to explain that. And in
Right.
our closing moments here, we're going to just kind of do a little quick round robin of some
Sure.
questions about what men can do and
Okay.
women, whoever's
Right.
watching. But if you could if you could put up microbiome,
Okay.
Milton's going to explain what that is because I don't think a lot of people know what that is. But that is critical.
That is crucial. The microbiome is the entire complement of bacteria that inhabit our large intestine. And the critical thing to know is that when you eat a plant based diet, your microbiome changes to a mixture of bacteria that are adept at breaking down plant fiber into all of these beneficial compounds that enhance your health, lower your cholesterol, reduce your blood sugar, and actually improve your health, lower your cancer risk, and just do amazing things to uh, um, uh, 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 just improve your mental functioning, lower your risk of depression. I mean, I encourage everyone to read about the power of the microbiome. Um,
So bacteria is gut bacteria in your large intestines, right?
yes,
Now
and
you said
what's
something. I,
important
I got
about
to ask.
that is that if you eat animal food, you get the wrong kind of bacteria. Instead of getting bacteria that can break down plant fiber, you get putrefactive bacteria because
Mm,
animal protein residues cannot be fermented, they can only be rotted. And so you get bacteria that create toxic compounds that uh, release poisonous toxins that actually harm your body and create compounds that increase your risk for colon cancer and other problems. And that's why people that eat meat, you cannot go into the bathroom after them unless you got a hazmat suit on, because you will pass out. Okay. And
mm.
I just got one more little saying I got to leave y'all with, and that is, people say, "Oh, I went plant based and I felt terrible and I didn't feel good and all this." And I tell people all the time, if you went plant based and going plant based is like having sex. If you didn't like it, you weren't doing it right. Okay, that's the bottom line.
Oh, so Milton, in our last moments here, just very briefly, somebody told me that This was a medical person. They said, you got to eat for your blood type. There are people thinking about that. I need to
That's
eat. My
nonsense.
blood type says I need to eat meat.
That's nonsense. That's nonsense.
Why?
It's
Why is that
utter
nonsense?
complete nonsense because there really is no blood type. The guy that learned how to transfuse blood realized when they started transfusing blood, they realized that they could do blood transfusions, but they started, they would do some transfusions and then they would have a catastrophic reaction. And because the reactions were so catastrophic, he realized this was an immune mediated phenomenon. So he started screening red blood cells and he realized that some red blood cells had proteins on their surface. And the first protein he identified, he called protein A. He screened other red blood cells, found a different protein. That second protein, he called protein B. And he realized that according to Mendelian genetics, if a person with protein A married someone with protein B and had kids, their children would have A, B blood.
Mm-hmm.
But the vast majority of people, 65% of human beings have no proteins on their red blood cells, and that's type 0. But he said, just to keep consistent, we will call it type O, but it's really type 0. So that's all that blood type means, okay? It has nothing to do with your genetic background or makeup. It just means whether or not you have a protein on your red blood cell. And it doesn't tell you anything about what you should eat, where you come from, or what kind of background you have. And then some unscrupulous, non-scientific person came up with some idiotic premise that, the majority of people who have type O blood have ulcers. And people who have ulcers secrete a lot of stomach acid and should be eating a lot of meat. Therefore, people with type O blood should be eating meat. Nonsense across the board. Number one, ulcers don't come from too much acid. They come from infections with a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori. Human beings don't secrete enough acid to digest meat. And the majority of people with any disease will have type O blood because the majority of humans on earth have type O blood. So it was just a boneheaded, wrong-headed premise to begin with. So please don't buy into that nonsense. It is wrong and foolish and has no scientific background whatsoever.
Keto diet. What about that?
Oh my gosh. Again, if you want to stink, go keto. But the
Why is that, man? Why is that?
man, just look up keto crotch. People who go keto smell horrible. And it's a diet that is built on high fat and high animal protein. And the studies show that people who eat keto have accelerated atherosclerosis. They have more heart attacks, and they're showing signs of early cancer development because we are not meant to eat a lot of animal protein and animal fat, and it kills. Again, I want people who are listening to me to assume I'm lying. Look up disease rates in people who eat keto. They die sooner. They get sicker faster. They don't function mentally well because our brain only uses carbohydrate for its metabolism. If you're eating nothing but animal fat and protein, you're not feeding your brain properly. You can't function well. These people have brain fog. So if you want your kids to flunk out of school, feed them keto. And they won't have friends because they stink. I'm telling you, it is not good for them.
Milton.
Yeah. Look, I'm telling them like it is.
That's the only reason why I like talking to you, because you don't pull punches. I tell people,
Lord said, cry loud and spare not.
Spare not. And you don't spare not one bit. But I have said about this man that he probably is the single most influential aspect behind the fastest growing plant-based demographic, which is African Americans, and for sure because he was in What the Health and said what he said. Other people, they gave good science and gave good data, and it was good. But Milton pulled no punches. And I knew that he wouldn't pull any punches. I knew that he would go straight for the jugular because, people will try that gradual thing. People will try to just, do something that continues to take them down the path of sickness. But on this program, From Sickness to Health, that's exactly what we intend to do. Even if we
Okay.
have to sort of shock people into it, we
Amen.
want we want to have people go from a life of sickness to a
To help.
life of health. And it's not difficult to do, especially now in 2025. In fact, I've been around the world, and it just amazes me whether I'm in Philippines, with Thailand, Indonesia, and throughout Europe. One thing I find consistent are plant-based restaurants. They're
Yes.
everywhere.
Yes.
There's no excuse anymore. And not to mention the aisles are stocked with things that you can do. And you can grow your own food. You can actually buy different things and learn how you don't have to make it complicated. You got to make a casserole and you got to make a vegan lasagna. You know what? If you've got some good legumes, am I right, Milton? Some
Absolutely.
a good
Absolutely.
grain, whole grain. If you've got, fresh fruits and vegetables, you've got a meal. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And the beauty is you can make it as fancy or as simple as you want. When I was a teenager and changed my diet, I survived on whole wheat bread and peanut butter and
Peanut
honey
butter. I knew he was going to say peanut butter.
all the time. Uh, um, but and then gradually learned how to cook and got a little more sophisticated. But yeah, beans and rice and vegetables, man, you're set.
And
And
everywhere you go in the world, people
yeah,
have a staple of rice, they have beans, and they have some kind of a greens. And I
there
tell
you go.
you, if I can have that, I'm a happy camper. Look, we've gone past our time. We could continue to go on. We'll have to do this again because you know
Yes,
every time you come onto this program, you say something that I'm sure people go, "What did he just say?" Last week it last week it was nay nay break up. Nay nay needs to break up, and you need to break up with your food.
right.
This week it was about five things, but go back and watch the program because I know you can't get it in one bite. It's a full meal. Thank you so much, Milton, for spending this time on From Sickness to Health with me.
My pleasure, man.
I'm looking forward to the next time until we have the whole world like cousin
Anytime you
Nene.
want me on, just ask.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you so much for joining and watching this program. We look forward to our next time. We want to thank our producer for just Alonda, who is just about it, and we appreciate you as well. We look forward to you next week when we're going to continue this. Oh, by the way, Milton, did you know that this week is Men's Health Week?
I did not know that.
Men's Health Week. I didn't know it either. And I said, wow, isn't that providential? So we're going to continue this month talking about men's health, even as we go up to Father's Day, because we want to see brothers, fathers,
Absolutely.
men be healthy. May God bless you. And we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Milton.
Thank you. All right. My pleasure, man. All right. Take care.